Well, good morning and welcome everybody to Make for Asia, where we'll be looking at the emerging Asian middle class and opportunities for Australian manufacturing. My name is Kristen Bosenberg. I'm a business solutions consultant and moderator in the Telstra Experience Centre in Sydney. It's great to have you on board. Now, we have a very diverse set of speakers today located all over Australia, which is very exciting for this event. And I just want to mention that in the viewer that you've got for this event, you've got lots of options. You can see the content in the slide pack that will be presented to you. You've got the opportunity to ask questions throughout the event, and the speakers will try and get to those questions as we go, and we encourage that. And you've also got the opportunity towards the end of the event to fill in a survey as well. Now, turning to our speakers for today, firstly in Melbourne, we have Charlie McDonald, and Charlie is the Industry Executive for Manufacturing, Transport and Logistics at Telstra. Prior to joining Telstra, Charlie had a number of senior business and IT roles, spanning more than 25 years in the transport sector. Charlie is the chair of the ICT Working Group for the Australian Logistics Council. The ALC, or the Australian Logistics Council, is the premier industry body in Australia, representing transport, logistics and supply chain businesses. Joining us from Brisbane.
Hey, Christian. Thanks, mate. Just saying good day to everybody. That's all, mate. Thank you.
There we go. So Charlie is in Melbourne, and joining us from Brisbane, we have the Associate Professor, Dr. Damien Hine. And Damien is currently the Strategy Cluster Leader at the University of Queensland Business School and the Associate Professor in Innovation and Commercialisation in the University of Queensland Business School. Damien has also been commissioned to write papers in innovation and intangible assets for the OECD and UNESCO. He's published 2 books, including one on innovation and entrepreneurship in biotechnology, and numerous book chapters, as well as over 30 journal articles. He's currently the international consultant on Vietnam's National Innovation Training Program, and he's currently running innovation and commercialisation programs in Vietnam, Fiji, Chile, Ecuador, and Colombia.
Good morning, everyone.
So Damien's in Brisbane, and we also have us joining from Toowoomba. We have John Cole, who is a sales manager with Telstra in the Telstra Business Transport, Manufacturing and Logistics industry.
Morning, all.
Excellent. So we've got Charlie, we have Damien and John on the line. And just to set the agenda for today, what we're looking at, we're going to be looking at firstly setting the scene and seeing the size of the opportunity and the size of the middle class in the Asia region. We're going to look at the demand coming from those markets. We're then going to look at the manufacturing opportunities, look at megatrends, looking at demand trends, and then finally we're going to look at how technology can enable access to the market, and we'll look at business model innovation and connected manufacturing as well. So there's lots to look at, lots to talk about, and firstly we're going to hear from Charlie McDonald, presenting from Melbourne.
Christian, thank you very much, and welcome again, everybody, to this series of events. First of all, I'd like to give you a bit of an introduction to this work and really acknowledge the work that not just Damien did in this research paper, but also the great support we got from CSIRO and Sarah King and her team of researchers in creating this piece of work that really looks at how can sort of Australian business, Australian manufacturing, access the opportunity that this emerging middle class brings. We started this work about a year or so ago when I was in discussions with CSIRO, and we were talking about some of the reshoring phenomena that was going on across the Pacific, and it was clear that there were a number of drivers that were moving some of the reshoring activity from Asia across to North America, and some of it was around the challenges of trying to secure the right skilled labour in Asia and the opportunity of relatively available and skilled labour in North America, the changing equation on energy prices in North America versus Asia, the reduction in not quite plentifulness, but of the access to relatively cheap energy sources in the North America was changing, and clearly there was one other activity that was causing reshoring, which was this concept of being closer to the market. So moving manufacturing from Asia to the United States means you're closer to the market. But there was one other factor that we were discussing as well. Is one of the reasons to reshore across the Pacific was the need to rebrand your manufacturing base of being from made in this case it was made in China, to made in the United States, in order for you to sell back into the middle class. And this we thought was a really interesting concept, and we tried to understand exactly what the dynamics is. So why would you reshore manufacturing if your main market was going to be in Asia? And we wanted to understand what these drivers were. So we commissioned this work, and CSIRO, together with Damien and his team, did this research, which I think you're going to find really engaging on looking at this market. And the first thing the research found was the size. Now, the current slide is showing you the 2009 global middle class consumption, and you can see that the vast majority of middle class consumption is based in Europe and North America. And if you like, the centre of gravity of commerce there is somewhere in the mid-Atlantic. And if we just roll that slide forward, you're going to see the change in patterns of consumption. So we've got a view now of 2030. And in 2030, we can see the whole centre of gravity of global commerce has moved from somewhere midpoint in the North Atlantic to somewhere probably just north of where we are in Australia. 59%, so just under 60% of global middle class consumption will be based in Asia. So this creates this huge opportunity for us because of our closeness of market. Just to give you some understanding of size, this slide says by 2030, the size of the middle class in Asia will be 3.2 billion. That's an extraordinary marketplace on our doorstep here in Asia. And I'm just going to hand over to Damien to just go through this concept of meganiche.
Thanks, Charlie. So we look at the size of the market, and that's a pretty broad view of what's happening across Asia and where the trends are in terms of the populations. But what we wanted to do was drill down a little bit more into what are the sectors, what are the areas, and where are those opportunities going to really come from. And what we came up with was 4 particular areas which seem to be emerging, but also this concept of a meganiche. It's a fairly simple concept. What we're saying is that given the size of the market, the changing demographics, the increased demand amongst the middle class across many countries in Asia, very few of those countries are being left out now. What we're seeing is and especially for, say, small to medium enterprises in terms of manufacturers, they're always looking for niches. Niches are going to be very apparent throughout Asia, but they're really going to be mega niches. They're going to be much, much larger than the niches that we would normally consider to be a niche back here in Australia. So they're mega niches, they're niches, there's going to be opportunities. Not everyone's in that market already. So there's going to be opportunities to get into that market, but they're huge markets, so they're going to look somewhat different to what we would normally see back here domestically. Then we looked at some of the areas that are probably going to be major areas of demand. The first one is health. So we're looking at things together with increasing population, increasing wealth. Also, the need in many countries, such as particularly China and India, to maintain, even as an individual, your productivity when you're facing a situation of health systems which are not fully developed. You've got to stay healthy to be productive, to keep earning, to keep your family going and things like that. So health is going to be a huge area of growth in the coming years. Food and beverage is the second one there. And what we're seeing is a dramatic increase not only in the volume of demand for food products, but with the emerging middle class, it's the quality of those food products. That's linked to health as well, of course. So a lot of these things are linked together. But it's the quality of food, the clean green image, things like that, where there's a lot of opportunities, for example, secondary processing in fruit and vegetables rather than just sending over the primary product. The third one there is services. There's a massive opportunity to value add in terms of services which augment or value add around the manufactured product. So moving beyond just a focus on the product and looking at services which are going to add value and also add margin to companies. And the fourth one there is really where in the industrial area is there going to be increasing demand in coming years. One of the obvious ones is mining equipment and the technology sector. There's going to be huge demand there. Now, the thing about this is that it's not going to be just open season. There's going to be a lot of new competitors moving into those markets as well. So we'll be looking at that in a little bit more detail. These are opportunities. They're being driven by demand and growth in population, but you have to be competitive to enter those markets and to stay in them. I'll hand back to Charlie now.
Yeah, Damien, can I just ask you about the meganiche? So it's really a niche in Asia, which is just a part of that particular economy, if you like. But the opportunity is that big that would be a significant market for anybody really in Australia.
Yeah, that's right. So, they're so substantially larger that, and what we really need to understand is that when you're talking about niches, it's usually small to medium businesses which are the ones targeting those niches because they have something different. They've innovated. They've got something about their product, their technology, their services, which is a bit different. That allows them to enter into a niche. Now, what we're saying is that's exactly what's going to allow them to enter into a niche throughout many of these Asian countries and across those countries. But these niches in terms of size are so much more substantial because of that population, because of that demand. So the opportunities are much greater. That has its own implications because what they have to do is face the issues of scale up, for example. Getting to scale quite rapidly is quite often very problematic for small firms in particular and has a lot of implications for cash flow and their ability to keep competing in the market in the short term so they can achieve long-term success. So it's a lot of good, but there's some downsides to all of that as well.
Yes, I mean, I remember I worked for a Japanese technology company in Europe, and Australia was a drop in the ocean for the market. So they never really focused on Australia. Nobody really wanted to have it in their patch. But I think it's interesting that challenge to scale from Australia to manufacture towards Asia. You made a good point, Damien. I just wanted to follow up on it. You talked about green imaging, and you're talking about food and beverage and the idea that green products are becoming more prominent. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Oh, well, I mean, that's something that we have an advantage on. We'll talk about it a little bit more later, but, issues like, density of population, scarcity of resources in terms of water and things like that, we do have the abundance of resources here, but what we also need to do when, focusing on the manufacturing side of things is to introduce, processing which value adds the products that we have, so that we're making the most of the environmental conditions here, which are very, very important and increasingly important throughout the Asian market as they get more and more focused on these issues. They want clean, green products. We have those to offer, but we also need to value add with our products. Rather than having commodities which we're trying to compete with, we need to be value adding. So, simple things like, individually packaged mangoes going into Japan, shaped peaches is another example too. These are products which are actually going into the market. The mangoes are selling for $100 each. And they're beautifully packaged. And
how many can I take through customs?
Say that again? Oh, how many you can take through? As many as you like, as long as you're an importer.
Yeah. Very good. So thank you for that. Charlie.
So that links quite nicely into our demand management, our demand analysis. Kristen, if I could if we have the next slide. How we approach this research is we wanted to understand a bit more about the market first. Damon will take us through the megatrends in manufacturing, but the first piece of work was really a bit more of a deep dive into what is driving the marketplace. And we've got 5 key drivers that I'm going to go through. And it really links in with what Kristen and Damien have just been talking about. The first one is really, some of this might be bleeding obvious to us all, but it's really as a population goes from being in this developing to being developed. The first thing is this increase in discretionary spend. And I think this is a really interesting concept. You know, just read on that slide there what it's saying about cars and electronics and recreational equipment will far surpass the primary goods in terms of consumption in Asian economies. We now have spare cash, and of course we shouldn't see Asia as one market. China is going to be very different demographic to India. We'll talk a bit about the aging population of North Asia, of Japan and China, versus the young economies, young in terms of the population, the demographic of Indonesia and India. And of course India is fascinating with the new changing government, with this very, very young and vibrant workforce. Indonesia, our closest next door neighbour, of course has got the same profile. So I think another one of our lessons coming out of this research is these are very, very different markets. And I've heard people from manufacturers and retailers talking about their China strategy is we only do mega cities. Now for them, mega cities may be cities of over 2-3 million people. That might be 60 or 70 locations. But there's a direct correlation to their strategy to the local market. If we can go on to the next trend, please.
To that point, Charlie, so it's Kristen here. Because Telstra signed an agreement with Telkom Indonesia, and overnight we announced an agreement with Tata in India. But what I found was when talking to people from Indonesia, they've got this growing wealth coming through in the population, and they want the services, but they're not available. So, and that was particularly in the health space. But I think it's interesting because you're saying they've got more money to spend, and they want to spend it on higher value goods. But in a lot of cases, there's no infrastructure in place for that, or the services aren't there, even though they are available in countries like Australia.
Absolutely, and no one said this is going to be easy, and no one said this is going to be straightforward. So you've got challenges in culture, you've got challenges of immaturity of infrastructure, and in fact that's one of the reasons why Telekom Indonesia and Telstra have signed a joint venture, because they're wanting input of some of our service expertise to add value to their network capability. So, businesses on this call, I'm sure, will be doing the same thing. You'll have in some markets you'll go with joint ventures, some markets you'll go with agencies, and some markets you'll go with wholly owned entities, and some markets you'll just partner to sell to. The interesting thing is having insights into each of the markets and having the correct approach. What we did in this research was a fairly holistic. The slide we're on now talks about the trading up, and the trading up links very much with this increased discretionary spend. This particular piece of data is actually focused on China, and the horizontal axis is household income on RMB versus age. And what's surprising to me about this is this preference for foreign goods, and we can see the bottom right-hand corner where we've highlighted in that segment. This is younger, wealthier people wanting to have. So, from 73% of people in this survey prefer to have foreign-made digital gadgets, and I suppose that's obvious when we think about the brand leaders. But we should also not be complacent, because there's some very, very clever and innovative Chinese businesses in this area that will be challenging in this marketplace. I use Vertu as an example, the UK-based handset manufacturer that is able to access this mega niche in Asia by moving up the value chain, producing high quality mobile phones with very, very high quality services around it. So, they touch both the niche approach plus the servitization story. If we can go on to the next demand trend, please jump in if anyone's got any comments on that. I wanted to pick up this idea. If we go on to the next slide, please.
It's good, Charlie. Keep going.
Oh, okay, good. So the other factor is the increased diversity here of consumer preference. So we will be seeing, from a customization perspective, the need to be very local and the need to respond to local culture and requirements, and not just from a sort of a national or geographical sense, but the individual. So like we're seeing in the developed world, this concept of customization or personalization, people who are going to be successful in accessing this market will be able to answer this need for the demand for individual solutions. So it's not only is this is going to be a tough market from a cultural perspective, the need to be agile and flexible is also important.
I mean, I agree, Charlie. I mean, I was talking to a wine producer, and they were the tastes of the Asian market, they say, are changing over time, and wine is not a traditional product in Asia, or not the wine that we tend to drink and consume on a daily basis. But they were finding that they had to create different grape varieties or different mixes of grapes for different markets depending on taste. So even though it's customization, it's still a massive market in each location.
Okay, the next the next trend associated with this marketplace is really interesting, and it really takes on what sort of Damien was saying. This need for not only is this, they've got increased consumer preference, but also they're wanting to buy not just high quality products, but products that have lower environmental impact. And the slide that we're describing now talks a bit about Chinese consumers willing to pay 10% extra for greener products. We're seeing, obviously, one of the highly publicised product issues they have in that area today is baby formula. And we've got Australian manufacturers moving into that space where we can use our high level of compliance, we can use our high level of integrity in our supply chain, our high level of quality in our production methods to differentiate versus local, and of course there's some very big international competitors in this space, to answer to this demand from this market saying, frankly, I want safer goods. Frankly, I want goods that have not damaged the environment. I want to make sure that people are safe in the process of production. And I think Australia has a really, really strong opportunity of not just its engineering excellence in this area, but also in its transparency and high levels of compliance. Of course, from a negative perspective, we see that as cost, but maybe this is opportunity. And my final, if we can go on to the final demand trend, is if it wasn't tough enough already, we've also got the same trend that we're seeing over in developed nations of this demand for convenience. So, we want it. I want it how I would like it. I would like it with my features. I would like it to be safe. I want to have it, make sure that it has a high level of integrity, and I want it when I want it, how I want it, and this, so we've got this demand now of this growing B2C market, this growing online, Asia Pacific will account for 40% of global B2C sales. So we're convenient. We want it ready now, and I want to buy it whenever and however I want it. So this is strong in terms of complexity and demand, but obviously the opportunity is huge. When I go back to the size of this market, 3.2 billion by 2030. Chris, and I think
that's right. Thanks, Charlie. We're going to go through a poll question initially as we digest that information. So this is an opportunity for everybody on the call to give their opinion. And we're asking the question, my business is aligned to the opportunities of the middle class of Asia. In terms of that statement, my business is aligned to the opportunities in the middle class of Asia, or the opportunities they're creating. You either strongly agree, you're not sure, you disagree, or you strongly disagree. I think it's an interesting, in terms of all the demand that you've talked about, Charlie, I mean, is this a growing demand for like every product and solution, or do you see the demand changing over time as well? Is it a pure volume question, or does the type of product also change over time?
I think that's a really good question. I mean, I think a lot is written about us moving up the value chain from a manufacturing perspective. So as we move up that value chain, we need to add more products and services which answer to these 5 different areas of demand. And we'll talk a bit about this later once we match the megatrends in manufacturing to the opportunities. So we're not going to win the lowest cost mass production war. That's not our game. What we're going to have to do is add extra value, and we're seeing that with successful businesses. And we'll talk a bit about some case studies previously. And I did this presentation in Brisbane about 2 months ago, and a Queensland-based T-shirt manufacturer came to talk to us about how they could access. They were wanting to sell Australia-made T-shirts back into China, which I thought was interesting because obviously, that industry had offshored to Asia years ago. But it was the Australian kite, Mark. This is our differentiation, and we will customise. So you'll go on a website, you will design your own T-shirt, and we will produce short runs of that, and it will be exclusive to you, and that will be value. And I think we can talk of a number of different examples about customisation will differentiate our products back into Asia.
Well, it sounds like a very much an accelerated business model that Zara adopted initially with great success in the market. Look, just going to the poll question, Charlie. So in response to that, over half of the listeners on the call believe that their business is aligned to the opportunities of the middle class of Asia. I know from a Telstra perspective that our CEO, David Thodey, flagged that his aspiration was to have about a third of the revenue of our company aligned to Asia or emanating from Asia by 2020. So I know that Telstra is also focusing on the region for lots of different reasons, including the geographic location. But it's interesting that half agree that their business is aligned, and about a quarter aren't really sure. So we'll move on to our next slide, which is looking at the megatrends in manufacturing. Damien, as one of the head researchers, could you take us through that?
Yeah, look, I think that poll is a very interesting one as well. In effect, we're looking at 3/4 of the people involved in this agreeing that they're aligning their businesses to the needs of Asia. So we're, in a way, preaching to the converted. So you won't be surprised at a lot of what we're coming up with here. I think what was important in terms of what we were trying to do in this work is tie everything together so that we could offer something of a strategy for, and again, I go back to particularly for SMEs, a strategy for them in terms of tackling the markets in Asia and the way that they're moving into the future. So if we look at this slide relatively quickly, we're looking at the megatrends in manufacturing. And we start with the emerging markets. Fairly obviously, those markets are growing. They're going to keep growing. We keep seeing new countries kind of coming on, stream in terms of in their development. So we're going to see that demand grow for many years to come. It will shift country by country. We do have an emphasis around China in terms of emerging markets and existing markets, Japan and Korea, for example. But there are a lot of markets which we see small firms tackling, but probably not en masse yet. So Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia would be some of those, Myanmar would be some of those markets which hold promise into the future, so they'll be coming online. So we expect those demands to keep increasing. The other issue, of course, with that demographic shift and the dramatically increasing population is really the resource scarcity. And I remember talking with a businessman from Korea recently, and he just made a fairly clear statement. He said, we don't have resources anything other than people. They do very well, given that if people are their main resource. But that's the thing that we have an advantage in as well, in terms of our resource abundance, which we need to take advantage of. Going back to food again, so the next one there is food for all. And this is really, again, a volume thing. There's going to be more demand for food products, but it's going to be, as Charlie mentioned as well, is a demand for better quality. Sometimes more processed food, but certainly better quality food. And that is, we're going to see those types of trends, and also shifts in things like the protein source. So we're seeing more kind of demand for meat rather than, say, grains, which is what was the place traditionally. The next one there is responsible industry. And that's clearly a major trend which is happening. We're seeing that, the current 5-year plan for China is very much around corporate sustainability and environmental sustainability. So these trends are very clear and evident, and they're really pushing changes in the manufacturing process currently. And again, they're linked. All these things are linked. The responsible industry also pushes some of the technological advances as well. And I think the issue there with the technological advances is that we're seeing with the emergence, the emergence of the middle class, the emergence of these economies also means there's very, very large numbers of firms emerging in these economies as well, which are doing something right so that these economies keep growing. Many of them start off on a fairly basic footing, competing locally, but to compete globally, like we're trying to do, they need to be doing something which sets them apart. We're going to be seeing increasing numbers of firms that our companies are going to be competing with as they move into markets across Asia. So it's not going to be, and I think I mentioned earlier, it's not an open opportunity. We're going to be seeing more and more competition. We're not going to be able to compete on cost or price in most cases. Our labour costs really don't allow us to do that. We need to be seeking advantages in areas where we do have strengths, and we do have strengths around our technological capabilities, our service capabilities. These things are where we have advantages because we've been doing this for a long time. We have a strong education system. We have a very strong infrastructure behind us, so we tend to do those things quite well, and that's where our advantages lie.
Thanks, Damien. Sorry, do you mind if I just throw to John,
Yep.
who's up in Brisbane? John, because you've got some customers that have been responding to some of these mega trends, particularly in the meat industry and the food industry for Asia. Could you take us through perhaps some of that?
Yes, certainly, Kristen, and certainly the comments from Damien ring true when I think of one of the examples that I'll talk about now, and it's specifically around protein into the growing Asian market. And one of our customers that we have a very close relationship with has recently established a new processing plant in Northern Australia, specifically to ensure greater access to those markets, to ensure improved quality of the products that they export. And part of the conversation we had with them last time is really changing a lot of their manufacturing process to be more specific and providing, as I think Charlie mentioned earlier, the demands of the consumers are changing as to what they want and how they want it to look, and they've had to be a lot more flexible in the way in which they export that, so that when it arrives at its destination, it can find its way to the supermarkets and the distribution chains, and with an extended shelf quality and certainly a much improved product. So that's an example of a significant strategic move by this company to get much closer to that market and be more flexible whilst maintaining the high quality that the Australian market is well known for. And Damien also mentioned earlier about the mangoes. In fact, one of our customers out of Brisbane was only sharing with me in Melbourne last week that they're starting to export the quality. They're the Australian exclusive distributor for a particular mango breed, and they're now starting to export into Asia. And the premium that they can extract from their product is significant, and it's a very good quality product, but it represents a good business opportunity for them as well.
I find that remarkable. I mean, in many parts of Asia, mangoes are more recognisable than apples. So the market's always different, but there's some great examples. So thank you for that, John. And just to throw back to you, Damien, where do you see the opportunities for manufacturing?
Oh, that's a big one. I think when we look at it, what we tried to do was bring all these elements together. So if we look at this slide, we've actually, and particularly Charlie talked through the demand trends. So this is what we see coming through, across Asia. None of us like to use that term Asia. It's too much of a catch-all, but we are trying to get a sense of where the trends are emerging across the entire region. And so they're going to vary country by country, but there's still going to be a trend, which is evident. And the evidence of the trends are in these areas. They're going to be concerned about health. They're going to have more discretionary spending. They're going to vary their consumer preferences as they move up through those wealth categories. They want more convenience because they have less time. They don't have time available, and they're trading up. They're moving through, from transistor to, as you think, through traditionally CDs, DVDs, and through to MP4s and so on. This is a type of trend which happens, but it happens a lot more rapidly now than what it did in the past. So the trading up is going to be a very important one. That's, to me, really one of the most important aspects of all this is how quickly things are happening and will continue to happen. And it is going to be very difficult, I think, to keep pace with the change in these markets unless you're really closely connected, and Charlie talked about that. It's actually that closeness. Now, that could be a geographic or a physical closeness, which is very, very important, but it's maintaining a closeness in terms of regular contact, close communication, understanding culture. These things are going to be critically important and are going to be where a lot of the advantage comes from. The other thing we talked about... Oh, sorry, go on.
Sorry, mate. We've just had a question come in. It relates back to what you've been talking about. And the question was, this is great, Asian market, great volume, great demand. This is great for big companies like Telstra. But what about the smaller players? And, is the opportunity also for the smaller players in the market? And I know we talked about the scale challenge, but do you see that opportunity for small companies to be agile and to respond to demand quickly?
Well, personally, I think small companies are the ones which are agile, and they're the ones, and that's one of the reasons why we looked at this mega niche concept, because it's the small firms who have to target niches. They can't go into saturated markets. They can't go into markets where the big players already are because they're more mature. So they have to be tackling niches. The upside of that is if you're looking at mega niches, they're large niches, so there is a lot of opportunity for growth. But also then supplying those markets mean those scale issues come into it. I think, from my point of view, all of my work is with small firms, particularly innovative small firms across a range of industry sectors. So most of what I've done in here has been very much focused on the small firms. That's one of the reasons why, also going back to this slide, I have the technology enablers. So while we have the trends, and we have the mega trends in manufacturing, we have the demand trends, they do raise the opportunities. But really, what's going to make a big difference is the technology enablers. The technology enablers are the things which dramatically reduce the cost of research and development, for example. They dramatically increase the speed of research and development. They dramatically reduce the cost of communication and the speed of communication. There's so many aspects of technology enabling, and it can be what Telstra has to offer, but it's also going to be, sophistication in other areas of technology. And one of the things we'll talk about soon is the 3D printing as an example, additive manufacturing. The opportunities created by the advent of these kinds of technologies and the perfection of these technologies. Like 3D printing has been around since 1972. It's not new. But now you're seeing it, in a lot of different places. I was walking through a small town in Spain a few weeks ago, and there were 3D printing shops, just shop fronts there. We're at a stage now where we're seeing these enabling technologies almost pervasive, and they have to be utilised to take advantage of the opportunities.
Damien, can I ask you a different question, because that's more about the technology change. If I'm a small company and I want to move into Asia, how do I do it? I mean, you've got channels to market, but how would a small business go about that from your perspective? Because you've done a lot of research with small companies.
Yeah, I think, to me, it goes down to having an advantage. If you don't have an advantage in something that you do, then it's going to be very difficult to penetrate a new market. I think the logistics distribution channels are critical in there, and they can be tackled in very different ways. So that's an issue on its own. But if you don't have an advantage, and usually for a small firm, the advantage that they have is that they're the usual story of them being flexible, responsive. They've got something which is a bit different. It meets a specific need which the mass-produced product doesn't meet. So they tend to go for that customisation, that personalisation. That's where that advantage actually comes. And in Australia, we're generally noted for our rapid uptake of new technologies and utilising those new technologies in our production processes. But the technologies are also communication technologies as well, so that you manage things better.
I would also add that I think to access new markets, seeing Asia as a single market is probably is not the right answer. But so you've got to look at it at country by country, market by market. Also partnering the people that have done this before is to me is a great way in. We ought to talk a bit more about this resource efficient manufacturing. Yep. Damien.
Okay. So let's move on to resource efficient manufacturing. This is where some of the opportunities lie, and the resource efficient manufacturing is really around, I don't want to keep using that word technology all the time, but that's where a lot of that efficiency can come. So if you think of additive manufacturing, actually, in terms of if you've got a physical product, you're designing that product, you want to go through the prototypes, getting through to a working prototype. If you're trying to sell a product to a market, particularly a new market, if you've got a potential buyer, you want them to see what you've got. You want it to be tangible to them. They want to see, touch, and see it work. One of the advantages of additive manufacturing is that you can do that very rapidly, very quickly, and they can actually see what you're talking about in there. So it takes you beyond the design process very quickly. I think that's one particular area. Without getting too bogged down around the design and the product side of things, which is very much around manufacturing, where the advantages lie, really communication is going to be important. If it's going to be communicate, you might have a site based in Myanmar where they may actually be manufacturing your product. It could be a small site, but they might be manufacturing your product. There are opportunities for ICT technologies to assist you in terms of day-to-day communication with that site. It doesn't have to be, the old style occasional communication. It can be hands-on, day-to-day. You can also be sending through the designs and have them, developed and 3D printed on site there as well. These things can happen more rapidly and more easily. The networks are going to be important, and Charlie talked about partnering. That can be sometimes quite difficult and daunting when you're moving into a new market. And one thing I will say is that sometimes it's quite difficult to do that if you're looking at niches. There may not be a lot of partners that you can access. That can at times be problematic. So what you need to do is to look at some of the enabling technologies which are going to enhance your opportunities to pick, choose and work with partners. It's often the same story. It's going to be the LinkedIn's, going onto a group in LinkedIn, communicating with people. There's going to be other kinds of, lots and lots of, social media and things like that, which can enhance networks. But it's also, it's those internal networks which are going to be important in terms of advantage and competitiveness.
Damien, we're running short of time.
I think I might move to the next one. Yes.
Yeah, let's go. Because I'd love to get to some great questions from the audience as well. And we're going through to the business model innovation.
Okay, so look, I'll keep this brief. Business model innovation is, and many people who are listening will have heard that term. You probably heard that term, business model canvas. It's a very sexy term which is used. No one wants to do business planning anymore because it's too long and tedious, and no one wants to develop a 50-page document which they're never going to read again. So the idea of a business model canvas is something quick, easy, but also digestible. Someone can read it and understand it. And what we're talking about with business model innovation is really along those lines. You're looking at opportunities which come and go quite quickly. You have to be very responsive to those opportunities. So that can mean changing your business model on a very rapid basis, and it could be emphasising one product now for one market and then another product for another market. It could be shifting between manufacturing and R&D. There's lots of different ways that you can actually vary your business model. How are you going to add value? What is your value proposition and things like that? That can vary very rapidly, but it's going to have to vary rapidly in these markets. So it's not just the business model that's important, it's the innovation in that business model which is going to be important.
Jamie, do you have a quick example of somebody that may have done that?
Look, one that we had, one of the cases that we had in the document that we put together, the white paper, was BRAF, a motorcycle manufacturer, and they actually outsource most of the manufacturing process. So they're based in Victoria, and they're a Telstra award winner as well by coincidence. But what they actually source from probably about 7 or 8 different countries, I believe, around the world. And they're in constant communication with their suppliers. And their suppliers, they're working on prototypes all the time as well. They're very focused on research and development in combustion engines and electric motorbikes. Now, they've been very successful because what they're also doing is focusing on where the demand is in their markets, and a lot of their market is based in China, and that demand is changing. So they're very closely in tune with that market, and they can then vary the products according to the needs in their very nicely defined market. So their range of products is surprisingly broad for a small company like that.
Great, thanks, Damien. I'm going to throw back to Charlie now to talk about connected manufacturing and also industrial collaboration very briefly.
Yeah, so Kristen, we've probably got about sort of 5 minutes, and then allow a few Q&A session.
Absolutely, mate.
As Damien was saying, we took this demand trends, we took the mega trends from manufacturing, and we came up with these 4 opportunities for manufacturers. The connected manufacturing has been well documented outside this study, and you'll see this as a sort of emergence and confluence of a number of different concepts. The industrial internet, the Internet of Things, So we're seeing in our old, this change from an old disconnected manufacturing world to the connected manufacturing world, where almost all through the supply chain, from the supply side through to the consumer, is now capable of being connected through mobile, internet, social media, cloud solutions. Intelligent robotics is becoming more and more interesting. We've got an example in our paper about a bakery in Adelaide, Perriman's Bakery, using robotics to produce cookies, gingerbread cookies for the Singaporean market. We're seeing the capability of advanced manufacturing processes allowing businesses to be much, much more agile. So this concept of customization is being enabled by the advanced manufacturing. So the idea that we can make one of something at an affordable price has been enabled by the types of technologies that we're talking about. Now, I will talk one other thing around industrial collaboration. So we believe that through collaborative innovation, we are going to see new products and services being created by Australian manufacturers. That is not going to say, and I'll just put a caveat on what we've been talking about in the last 50 minutes, we absolutely understand the need to get to the right price. We understand absolutely that the price pressures in our marketplace and the well-documented challenges of this sector in Australia. However, the future may not be just about efficiency. We need to clearly be at the right price and right service costs. But by using collaborative platforms, by connecting, by being agile, by being innovative, we believe we can access this market. If we could just go on to the next slide, please. What we've done is, in this particular slide, is we've drawn a picture of where we see the enabling technologies, and this is a sort of summary of where we are. So on our left-hand axis here on the screen, we've got two different types of technology areas. We've talked about manufacturing technologies, and underneath that is the ICT technologies. And on our vertical, we've got our four opportunities of resource efficiency, connected manufacturing, business model innovation, industrial collaboration. What I think I take out from this and this study that we did was this incredible convergence of technology. In the old world, manufacturing and operational technologies were very separate and were basically analog or electric. Now in our new world, they're digital and connected. And that allows us, in this, this great principle of the Internet of Things, now we can monitor. Once we monitor, we can measure. Once we measure, we can manage. And once we can use this data from our management, we can now be much more responsive. So it isn't just about 3D printing, but 3D printing is a great flagship and a great point of conversation. And we believe that in terms of adoption, we are on the cusp of adoption of 3D printing. Robotics are dramatically changing the way that people are conceiving the manufacturing process. And we've got some very mature views of robotics in many of the sectors. The Internet of Things and sensors and automation bringing us this idea. We are talking to, right now we're talking to a beer manufacturer in Australia about how we can monitor and measure temperature and flow in pubs and clubs to make sure that their quality is maintained. And now that is a domestic Australian view, but that's a typical application of this technology for a manufacturer to make sure that their quality is maintained. If we can just go to the next slide, please. And of course, the underlying technologies, of such as cloud and security and network is almost a given. So I'm going to ask this is our summary of what we found with using the megatrends and the demand trends coming up to these four opportunities and the underlying technologies. And I'll leave us on our final page if you can, and then I think we should have a general discussion now and questions. This is our summary of where we were, and this is the infographic that's available on our website. My colleagues on the call, I'll ask you to just, whether we've got some more examples we want to share, or are there any questions we're going to get?
I do have a couple of questions here, Charlie. So I'd like to just address a couple of the questions that have come through from people on the call. And the first one is a business with 55 employees, and they're in manufacturing here in Australia. But their question is more about finding partners to collaborate with in Asia and how they would go about that. Anybody can answer that, including yourself, Damien.
Oh, okay, sorry. I was leaving that to Charlie. I thought he might have a lovely response to that one.
I was actually, I'll give Australia Post a bit of a plug. That, I don't know if our T-shirt manufacturer is on the call, but, you know, it's interesting if you're trying to access in this particular manufacturer, if you're trying to access into China, have a look at what the relationship that Australia Post has linked in with Alibaba, and that might help you gain access into that market without having to have the onerous compliance. When I say onerous compliance, the local compliance challenges of locally hosted website or whatever translation services. Maybe collaborating with someone like Alibaba might be an opportunity for you to sell back into that market. Damien, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, look, I'll try to keep it brief, but you know, there's so many different ways that you need to understand the partners, and partly it's going to be a cultural aspect too. So where there's a fit in terms of your you know, your business culture, but I think also you'd need to do good searches, and again, there's a lot of enabling technologies there that can help you. So you really do want to know, you know, the state of the market and who are your competitors in that market. You need to do a very thorough market analysis. You know, if you're manufacturing, you need to be doing patent searches, you need to be doing product searches, you need to be looking at product volumes, you know. You need to be actually understanding all of those things, and then what's the typical channels in terms of logistics and distribution. You need to get a very good understanding of the landscape, and then you start that partner selection process. So I do see that quite a bit where, you know, the company will just jump in before that, you know, and you don't want to leave it too long. You don't want to, you know, vacillate, but you do need to do your homework first. And if you can, I would strongly recommend to take quite a rigorous approach, almost, dare I say, pretend you're a researcher, and gather your data from far and wide so you can make much better judgments.
Might be worth us, if whoever that is, if they want to share the details, we might have a separate call with them.
Yeah, absolutely. We can follow that up. And I do appreciate Damien, the plug for researchers out there in the world. So look, we've only got a couple of minutes, literally a couple of minutes. Charlie, your final thoughts? Well,
look, I think just to reiterate, the opportunity here is huge, immense, but the challenge is not going to be easy. I think, you know, we're very optimistic. We believe that we can help innovate. We can add value to our customers' processes, and we'll be delighted to talk further with you about how we can help, certainly on the technology roadmap, to help you access this market.
Damien, your final thought?
I'd say the same. I think it's the opportunities are huge, but the competition is huge as well. And what we often do or see is people taking a static view, and, you know, looking at the way things are now. What we're trying to do here, and we're trying to encourage people to do, is to always look in the future, because that's where your competition lies. Your competition, as well as the opportunities, are all in the future. They're not just what's around you now.
Very good. And John, do you have any final thoughts?
No, just in terms of the future, you know, if I look at a company here on the Darling Downs that's looking a long term into the future, particularly with the opportunities that Asia presents, and a huge investment in a capital city grade airport facility to capture the food opportunities, the specialised industrial and mining equipment opportunities that present themselves in Asia. You know, they're looking at a 10, 20 year process, but they're certainly aware of what's going on, and they're preparing their business accordingly. So that's been very insightful. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, I'd like to thank Charlie, Damien and John for joining us on the call. I'd like to thank you for joining us. And remember, you can get in contact with your account executive to get further information from our presenters today. And remember that we do have another event next week. It's Telstra's Guide to the Cloud. on the 16th of October. You can join us again for that virtual event under the hashtag Telstra Virtual Events. You have the opportunity also at the end of this call to fill in the survey, and we'd appreciate your feedback on what you've heard today. But again, thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you again on Telstra Virtual Events very soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.